everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday. I hope you guys are doing well, thriving post some of the transits that have been going on this week. I had a little bit of a break in my content schedule and saw that it's Gemini season. We've got so many planets in Gemini, so I figured now is a really good time to do my Astro series on the profile on the various signs and planets. If you guys like this content, you want to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up if you like this information, and drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Just as a reminder, I teach astrology, so I actually have a beginner's 101 course and a 201 course to learn all about transits and the impacts of what's going on currently in your chart. This is an awesome series. It is study at your own pace, and it is hours and hours of lecture to better understand what's going on with your natal chart and the cosmos. So if you guys want to learn astrology, learn with me, click the link below and check out the courses that I have available. And you guys can learn astrology with me. All right, so we're going to talk all about the profile of Gemini, and I'm going to get this right out the gate very early on. Not only is this a really great time to be talking about Gemini, we have a stellium of planets in the sky. We're coming into what's going to be a Mercury cazimi here pretty soon. Jupiter's there. And I was having a conversation with my husband, I think it was like a week or so ago, and he was like, did you ever notice that we don't get as much traction on the Gemini videos? And I was like, how is that even possible? So those of you guys who are Gemini, third house placement, super mercurial, make sure you like this video, leave me a comment below because I really want to prove him wrong that that is not the case. I know you guys are really loud and proud, especially with Mercury and Jupiter in your sign. So if you've been following my series, each month I am touching on each and every one of the 12 zodiac signs. I'm going to talk about the profile of that sign, all of the things that you need to know about it, giving you a little bit more in-depth knowledge into the various 12 zodiac signs, primarily because we are more than just our sun, moon, and rising sign. I think it's so important to learn the entire wheel. All of us have 12 houses. We're going to have planets dispersed all throughout these various signs. So the more that you learn about the archetypes of the zodiac, the easier it's going to be to spot it out in the world and also better kind of understand your astrological makeup. So Gemini is what we're going to be discussing today. We are going to be talking all about this sign. And it is the third sign of the zodiac. So Gemini has traditional associations with the third house. It's seen as the sign of the twins. You see like that this is a double-bodied sign, right? Very similar to, Pisces and also Virgo. The mutable signs have kind of connection to the double-bodied signs. But this is the very first air element of the zodiac, and it is also the first mutable sign. So this is where we start to see a season turn. Now, depending on where you are in the hemisphere, here in the northern hemisphere, Gemini season is when spring is giving way and getting ready for summertime. So there is this change or this shift of how we think, right? How we relate, how we're moving around. And its ruling planet is the planet Mercury. So one thing that you guys want to know is that you're going to see that the ruling planet is going to play a huge role in some of the themes pertaining to the zodiac sign. This is considered to be a masculine energy because it is air, even though double-bodied signs can show two different signs or two different aspects of their personality. And the gemstone associated with Gemini is agate, and the color yellow and green. Now, some of you guys may or may not be wondering, why are twins associated with Gemini? Well, it turns out that the symbol of the twins is actually connected to the Greek mythological story of Castor and Pollux, also known as the twins. These two twin brothers with different fathers. Castor was mortal and Pollux was divine. So despite their different natures, they were inseparable and shared a very strong bond with one another. And when Castor was killed, Pollux was devastated by the loss and went to Zeus and asked him to allow to share his immortality with his brother. Zeus granted this wish by placing them both in the sky as a constellation that we now know as Gemini. So this myth kind of highlights the themes of duality, companionship, and the blending of different qualities which are central to the Gemini archetype. Now, like I said, Mercury rules Gemini. It also has connections and associations with Virgo, but this is going to be more in a sense of information, data, relaying information, receiving. And Mercury's qualities definitely come through when we look at the archetype of Gemini. Specifically, when we look at, Hermes in Greek mythology, or also known as Mercury, Mercury is named after the Roman god Hermes, and he was considered to be the messenger of the gods. So he was able to, go in between heaven and hell and relay messages. We see this throughout the Mercury retrograde cycle, as we see the retrograde, which kind of was about going back down into the depths of something and then bringing up the information, and also connecting with the heavens. So when we think about Mercury or Hermes, he's known for speed, his agility, his eloquence, and these are all traits that we see associated with Gemini. He's also known as the messenger. So Hermes, Hermes or Mercury, whichever one you prefer, was the god that facilitated communication between also the gods and humans. So Mercury is often associated with the transmission of information, ideas, and messages. Now, something else to think about is that Mercury does govern over all communications. So think of things like speaking, writing, and other forms of expression. Geminis are obviously known for their excellent communication skills and their ability to convey their ideas effectively. Mercury is also associated with intellect and learning. So your Mercury placement can tell you a lot about the way that you learn, what you're interested in talking about, learning about, where you're more flexible. So Mercury can have this connection to intellect and curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. And obviously, we know that Geminis have this naturally curious and strong desire to learn about various subjects. They can, have an interest in a multitude of different things and kind of flutter in and out of different topics that interest them. They're also known to be very versatile, and they can adapt very easily because they're a mutable sign. So they're very quick when it comes to their nature, and it really, I think Mercury mirrors the versatility and adaptability of Gemini. And Geminis can easily adapt to new situations and definitely think on their feet. So they're really quick to come up with information. They're really great to relay messages, and they're always you're always seeing the wheels kind of turning with them. And obviously, Geminis are also known for their very sharp minds and their ability to process information very rapidly. So it can also be about them always kind of being tapped into like that mental chatter that's going on within their own mind. Something you want to think about when we connect the sign of Gemini with Mercury, obviously, is going to be intellectual pursuits. So Mercury placements in a chart or Mercury transits are always going to be connected to that. The sign that you actually see Mercury go through is going to show you how that energy is expressed. But I believe that both Mercury and Gemini prioritize intellectual pursuits and the exchange of ideas. They're really great at playing devil's advocate. They can see two sides of an opinion. It's not unusual to see Mercury kind of, cheering for the underdog or being able to kind of bring up complex topics and ideas that may go against certain narrative or mainstream views. They're excellent communicators. I think that because Gemini has this connection to communication skills, it's a direct reflection of Mercury's influence, because I think they're able to articulate their thoughts pretty clearly and also persuasively. And then when we think of Mercury, there's also a strong connection to learning and teaching. Now, Jupiter is more so seen as the teacher, the mentor, the philosopher, but Mercury has this connection to early elementary school, early development, basic kind of information, remedial information. So Mercury does associate with learning and teaching, and also a love for gathering and sharing information. It's an air element, so it's very social. It likes to connect with groups of people and be able to share information, whether that's like in person in their local communities or in a group chat. Now, when we think about Gemini characteristics in a nutshell, I think the number one word that kind of comes to mind for me is curiosity. And we all know the phrase curiosity killed the cat. So if you've got a lot of Gemini placements, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes the curiosity can get you into some trouble, but I also feel like we need that kind of mischievous, always asking questions, always balancing out, type of vibe to be able to lighten the mood, especially in society. I love that Geminis are naturally curious and they have a strong desire to explore new ideas. They're often well-informed and enjoy acquiring knowledge across various subjects. So they make them an excellent conversationalist and just somebody who's really great to kind of like sit down and have a chat with to get information on what's kind of going on in the world. Obviously, they're very social, right? Gemini is, I think, considered one of the social butterflies of the zodiac. They enjoy meeting new people, making connections, and they really thrive in social environments. Now, when we think of Gemini, it can represent like the two sides, the two masks. There's a lot of chameleon traits that we'll see that comes up with Gemini placements where they can be very diverse in terms of their personality, but also in terms of where they can kind of adapt in, social environments. So I feel like so easily, they can be the life of the party and easily charm people who are around them and really kind of adapt to pretty much any environment. But they do have that dual nature. And that's baked in because of Mercury's kind of curious and flexible demeanor. It's also represented by the twins, where we see two parts of one whole. And this can manifest as a tendency to sometimes be maybe a little erratic. We can definitely see it in some cases as being indecisive or changeable. Some people will claim and kind of give Gemini a bad rap for having different personalities, but I feel like really it's just the fact that they are able to recognize and identify, different parts of themselves, and they can kind of, use them when they see fit. Obviously, there is themes that are connected to restlessness. So that's something I definitely see with Gemini placements. They can be very prone to boredom. They want to keep things interesting and lively and chatty and moving. And they crave variety. And I think that's really why they may get restless and sometimes struggle with routines or repetitive tasks. It's this need for constant stimulation that can lead them to juggle multiple interests or projects at once. But nevertheless, they're known for versatility because they can adapt in pretty much any environment. I love the fact that they have some really amazing wit and humor. They are really quick with the one-liners. They have a great sense of humor when it comes to lightening up any situation with their clever remarks and playful demeanor. They're curious and always learning and exploring new ideas. Excellent communicators and able to convey their thoughts clearly and persuasively. And they're very social and approachable. So it really helps to have these people in your inner circle, connect with them, go out with them, socialize, because likely it'll be something that's going to bring out some of these qualities and traits within you if that's something that you're lacking. Obviously, watch with Gemini placements for some issues that you can see with inconsistency. They may struggle to follow through on commitments. They may change their mind at a drop of the hat. Some people I've heard have claimed that there is like a superficial kind of energy that's tied to Gemini, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that Geminis can be perceived as superficial or lacking depth and just kind of hanging out on the surface. But I think that that's only something that really comes up when you're seeing that they're spreading themselves too thin, right? If they're doing too much at work, if they're juggling too much socially, if they're, getting emails and phone calls from people at too many times, there can be a sense of wanting to move through that. You might kind of have surface exchanges, but I wouldn't quite call it superficial. Yes, they can be known to be a little indecisive, weighing their options, but that is also a theme that we see kind of connected with the air element. The restlessness is definitely something that I see as well. And I feel like this is at times a sign that repetitiveness and familiarity and repetition is something that creates boredom. And you can see that both in terms of their career as well as their relationship. And you also will be able to kind of catch some Gemini placements because there can be some nervousness. They can be more prone to nervous energy or anxiety, but that's generally something that you see when there is like an overwhelmed Gemini or one that's kind of like in a situation where they're trying to kind of weigh their options, or they're questioning whether or not they should say what's on their mind. Now, in terms of archetypes with Gemini, there is a number of Gemini archetypes that I came up with. I think number one is going to be the Communicators. That's why you're going to see the title of this video is Gemini, the Communicators of the Zodiac. And when I say that, I don't mean just a talker, although some of them are kind of the mouthpieces out in the world. But when it comes to expressing their thoughts and their ideas, especially from the perspective of specific houses or maybe even the sun in Gemini, there is this real strong tie to the identity being about talking, sharing, learning, and exchanging. So this makes a lot of them natural writers, public speakers, networkers, programmers, travelers, teachers, and they're able to really identify their strengths and be able to use that out in the world when it comes to their career or their goals. Now, obviously, they're also seen as the messenger thanks to Mercury or Hermes because of that connection to that planet. But oftentimes, they will also take on the role of the messenger, sharing information, ideas, and news because they thrive on gathering and also dismantling information or knowledge. Mercury is a planet that's also about taking something apart, figuring it out, looking at all the pieces, and then potentially putting it back together, although we kind of leave that to Virgo to handle. But, when I think about people who might work on cars or people who build computers or people who are building software, anything where it requires, that mind-hand connection, that coordination, that's generally a really strong mercurial third house kind of Gemini vibe. Now, obviously, I think of the trickster or maybe even like the jester. The trickster archetype embodies like this playful, witty, sometimes mischievous nature of Gemini. They enjoy challenging norms, thinking outside of the box, and using humor to navigate complex situations. But Gemini can also be seen as like the student, especially with that connection to early childhood learning and development. Driven by the constant thirst for knowledge. Geminis embody the archetype of the eternal student, always reading, always learning, always kind of diving deep and exchanging information and really excited, right? They have like this kind of bright, kind of vivid energy when it comes to the excitement in their face when it comes to learning new ideas. The juggler, I guess I could also see that as like the trickster, but the juggler representing their versatility and adaptability. The juggler archetype describes Gemini's ability to handle multiple tasks and interests simultaneously. They're skilled multitaskers who thrive on a variety of change. So they can do more than one thing at once. I mean, it's like I always laugh when I see my Gemini friends that'll be like having a conversation looking at you while they're like texting at the same time or they're sending the email or they're talking to you at the same time. They can definitely walk and chew gum at the same time. There is some aspect of them being able to do more than one thing at once. And that also comes from, I think, the duality of the double-bodied sign. Definitely a social butterfly. I really feel like there is this highly social aspect to Geminis, and I love watching them interact with different people. I think that that's such a cool thing to watch because you can really see where they can turn on the charm, the sociability, and they have this chameleon-like ability to really fit into different social situations like effortlessly. They can walk up and start a conversation with somebody, and maybe that's part of the charm where it's like very disarming and communicating and talking and kind of joking around and engaging with people. A couple other ones for me would be the journalist because they're always pretty keen on new or current events and storytelling. I really feel like a lot of significant Gemini or Mercury third house placements are definitely seen in a lot of professional, anchors, newscasters, journalists, bloggers, type charts. And I think this is because they also like have this talent for uncovering stories and asking questions and presenting information in an engaging manner. I think the one thing that I love about Geminis is they'll always be like, wow, how did that happen? Or how did you figure that out? Or did you know? Those are always how really like colorful, Gemini conversations always begin. And I think it's because they're always kind of questioning and they're searching and they want to be able to ask why. Obviously makes a really great journalist. They're also seen as like a networker. So I really love that they can have a tendency to really leverage their communication skills and sociability. They excel at building and maintaining networks. That's something they're very good at, especially when you think about, like the 11th house for Gemini is Aries. So they can be very independent and they can go out and start groups or go and make new friends, or they can kind of start movements. So they're really great at like building and maintaining networks. And I think the networker archetype emphasizes their ability to connect people, ideas, and opportunities effectively. So just a couple ideas Definitely, I could see like some inventor type of vibes too, or like innovators, because they very quickly and easily come up with new ideas, solutions, and approaches. And often this can lead to like groundbreaking discoveries. So we see this in a lot of people who are kind of into inventing or creating new things. A lot of it can deal with transportation, communication, apps, technology, and that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to health and wellness, because each and every one of the zodiac signs rule a different part of the body. Gemini obviously has a connection to the shoulders, the upper arms, the forearms, the wrists, and the hands, right? So anything relating to your arms is basically Gemini. Because of that connection also to Mercury, we see a strong association with the respiratory system, the lungs, and the bronchial tubes. Now, why? Well, that's Mercury. It's breathing, it's breath, it's everything that flows through your chest. So that way you're able to take in the air, have what's necessary to make all those little neurons and everything kind of work in your brain. And the breath is so necessary also for being able to vocalize and share things with other people. There is some connection with Mercury in the nervous system, although some of that is kind of shared with Uranus. But Gemini's connection to communication and mental agility also extends to the nervous system, influencing how the body possesses and responds to stimuli. Now, given these associations to their upper respiratory, their lung health, they need to be really mindful of anything that could potentially be putting strain on their breathing. Anything connected to deep breathing exercises, yoga, and physical activity can be very beneficial for Gemini placements. And they also want to really avoid repetitive strain or injuries in their arms and hands. Okay, so that's something else to take into consideration. Also, managing mental stress is really important because they can be more prone to having issues with stress and anxiety. So they would really benefit from activities that calm nervous energy, such as meditation or mindfulness practices, right? Easier said than done if you've got a lot of Gemini placements, because there's always something that's kind of going on upstairs. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the difference between the sun, moon, and rising. And I want to give you some insight on the difference of these particular placements. I would say, I've gotten pretty good at being able to spot a lot of the rising signs. I think you look at enough charts and you meet enough people and you kind of really start to kind of see some of these things come through. But for me, the Gemini rising, and I just reflect on like some of the friends that I've had since high school, the people that will change their style in a pretty dramatic way every so many years. That's something that I have noticed. Maybe they went through the goth or the emo phase, in like middle school or high school. And then they're like this like beautiful, like bombshell in their 20s, or maybe they go through periods where they're really up to date on the newest fashion styles. And like they can really be a chameleon and change a lot about their clothing, their hair, their makeup, anything like that, that really kind of gives them some kind of change to their appearance. We can also sometimes see that they may opt for more like androgynous styles. So we can see Gemini risings who are men that will adapt and kind of bring some elements in that can be a little bit more feminine. And we can see the same thing with women that may be sometimes opting for things that can be a little bit more masculine in their style, their haircut, anything like that, because we see that there is that duality. After all, Mercury was kind of seen as representing both of the sexes. It was not Venus or Mars. It was both. It represents the blending. So we can definitely see that there can be some of those themes. In terms of physical appearance, one thing that I have noticed about Gemini risings is that they have a very animated face, okay? They have an expressive face. Sometimes they can do those cartoon eyes. Sometimes they can have that big like shit-eating grin. They're generally very bright and lively, and they convey a sense of curiosity and intelligence. So they can get very animated in how they're communicating. They can use their hands a lot. And I think that because they have that connection to Mercury, generally they look pretty young regardless of their age. It's definitely more difficult to tell how old they are. Because Mercury is associated, I think, with a more youthful appearance, and there is definitely like this very kind of light and airy kind of vibe about them. So you don't kind of see them get kind of sluggish as they get older or change in pretty dramatic ways like you would see with some of the other rising signs. They stay really light on their feet. They're still very active and they're still very social. Generally, Gemini risings, something else you can see, granted, you have to take into consideration where is Mercury in their chart, where is it placed, what sign is it in, how's it aspected, because that rules a Gemini rising chart. And you want to look at the degree on the ascendant, but you tend to see that they have a slimmer build, and generally they can be a little bit more slender, sometimes a bit of a wiry build. And this is going to be reflecting their active and energetic nature. Now, obviously, genetics and other aspects of the chart kind of play into it, but unlike Gemini, unlike Virgo has more of like a boxy body. Gemini has a tendency to be a little bit longer arms and a little bit more lanky, okay? And you can definitely see also in their body with their movements, they can have a tendency to move a little bit. They'll fidget with their hands. They'll be playing with something. They're kind of just, tinkering with things when you're talking to them. They can seem a little restless. Sometimes they're always kind of moving around in a hurry, but always eager to explore. So if there's something that catches their attention, if it piques their interest, something they hear, they'll kind of stop and they'll be like really interested in communicating and going back and forth. They're really great with making it obvious that they're paying attention and they're listening when they're listening. And also distinctive hands, because of that connection with the hands and Gemini. Some of them have longer and like dexterous fingers, and often they'll talk with their hands. They'll talk with their hands a lot when they're speaking, and they'll emphasize their points with hand movements, or they might just be Italian, I don't know. So let's move on to the personality traits that you're also going to see with the Gemini rising. Very curious, a little bit more, I think, extroverted maybe than a Gemini sun. They can also be lively when it comes to, conversations. Very witty. I have noticed that about them with their communication skills. They're very charming. And I find that also they're always eager to learn and explore new things or share information. They may be a little bit more vocal than some of the other placements. So those are the things that you want to watch for. They're definitely always out there initiating conversations and kind of connecting to people. Remember, the ascendant is really kind of projecting. It's the embodiment of what, how you look and how people perceive you. Now, versus the Gemini sun, okay? So with the sun in Gemini, we're taking into consideration the core identity, right? The sun can be seen as the ego. It's the boss of the chart. The house is going to show you what part of your life there's going to be all that action. But in general, the sun in this particular sign is going to be, curious in terms of careers and creative, goals. They may identify a lot of their career or their identity or their purpose with travel, communication, learning, writing, or sharing, whether they're writing music or they're writing a blog, or maybe they're, a person who's involved with travel. There is going to be something where that's very much tied into their identity. And you see that a lot more with Gemini suns. There's also, I feel like, more of a focus on expression. Because the sun is definitely going to be about shining a light on something. So these people definitely thrive on intellectual stimulation. They enjoy sharing their ideas. I see them also having traits where they genuinely have a love for learning, and that's something that they enjoy to do. Remember, the sun has connections to like hobbies. So even if that's not necessarily their 9-to-5 job where they're working as a writer, they might write music. They might potentially be somebody who is interested in, putting together hobbies that are going to be connecting to crossword puzzles or other things that are going to involve working with the mind or working with the hands. And they definitely have a knack for connecting with other people. These are people who may do things in twos or do things in pairs as well. So you might see that they work as a two-person team when it comes to a business, or they prefer to go on a walk with another person, or they always want to be, talking about the book that they're reading with their partner because they were looking for feedback. And that's really going to help them when it comes to their personal kind of identity. Now, the Gemini moon, and the moon can be a more difficult sign to, or planet to spot, right? Because the moon represents kind of like our private nature, who we are when we're kind of behind closed doors, what's going on with us internally. So this will be something that can kind of be a little bit more difficult to find because the moon reflects your inner world. But a Gemini moon person processes emotions through an intellectual lens, right? So it's coming through a Mercury sign, often preferring to talk their feelings through. They can be very vocal about how they're feeling. They need variety and a lot of mental stimulation. I find that these ones get bored more often than the other two placements. I find that they may have more than one home, or maybe they, identify with two different places where they grew up, or they maybe change their home a lot because they get restless in terms of their living situation, or maybe they feel more comfortable moving furniture around. These are also people who enjoy and they find some sense of emotional security going for a walk, calling mom, talking on the phone to a sibling, and they're definitely, I find, a little bit more emotionally adaptable, but there can definitely be a lot of conflicting feelings with Gemini moons, and also with like making sense of what, your emotions are telling you, because the moon is considered to be one of the fastest moving planets when we look at astrology. So you might find that they have a wide range of emotions and they're kind of bouncing all over the place sometimes. Anyway, let's move into the planets in Gemini and take a look at what some of the planets in this particular sign might kind of suggest. So we talked a little bit about how Mercury has connections and associations with Gemini. Technically, it's in its domicile here, so it is at home being in Gemini, which means it's going to behave pretty favorably. It's going to be able to express the energy in the diverse, kind of quick-witted, communicative style. So if you happen to have Mercury in Gemini, you want to look at which house this is in. That area of your chart is going to show you, okay, where do I like to travel to? What do I like to talk about? What types of books do I like to read? And Mercury in this sign is definitely, I think, giving you a stronger set of communication skills, quicker thinking, excelling at gathering and basically going through information and having a very versatile approach to learning. So you might be a little bit more open-minded. There may also be a sense of you just kind of picking things up much more quickly, or parroting things much more quickly as well. Now, if you have Venus in Gemini, okay, so we're taking the archetype of women, femininity, values, beauty. This could be your style. This could be how you are in relationships to other people, where you find beauty and also comfort. So Venus in this sign, definitely, they seek mental stimulation. And I feel like more than a lot of the other Venus placements, this placement gets a bad rap. So I'm going to speak up for it just a little bit. But there is a sense of feeling loved because of some kind of mental exchange. So this is why you're going to see with Venus and Gemini that they can sometimes juggle more than one partner, because they're needing that stimulation and they're wanting to get, the text messages, the phone calls. They're wanting to be able to kind of have that constant stimulation. And because it's a double-bodied sign, sometimes they can juggle. You can see them be more open to open relationships, depending on the aspects. You can also see them, believe that it is possible to be in love with more than one person. And I think that's because they value variety. And when it comes to relationships, they realize that if things get boring, they need to kind of switch it up a little bit. And they start kind of looking at the different options that they have. Obviously, that does not mean that they can or cannot commit. It depends on the chart. But I think a lot of this is also because their social interactions are also marked by being charming, being flirtatious. They have a love for banter, right? Venus is in a mercurial sign. So they'll like somebody who is witty and intelligent and, communicative and, kind of puts their thoughts out there. They find perhaps women who are into books and learning and what some would classify as nerdy as something that's beautiful and attractive. They're going to be attracted maybe to somebody who's going to be a little bit more communicative maybe than most other partners. Now, Mars in Gemini. If we put Mars in this sign, obviously Mars is the planet of passion. It's about masculinity. It's about aggression. It is about combativeness. And I find that people who have Mars in Gemini, I will say that they do much more damage with their mouths than they could with their hands. And I think a lot of them know that, when we think of Mars, it can be symbolic of like a weapon. So yeah, definitely they are more likely to debate and have a fierce exchange than to necessarily get into a fist fight in a parking lot, right? I think that their conflict style is very quick wit with their verbal skills, and definitely preferring debate over physical confrontation. This is a difficult place to have Mars too, because it's kind of like bobbing and weaving. It's all over the place. It's not something that can be contained because it's air. So these are also placements of people who sometimes need to blow off steam. Maybe they need to go for a run. Maybe they really need to sometimes go outside and just scream just to get it out, because that can be a lot of mental energy that they can be kind of holding on to if they don't have an outlet for it. Obviously, this gives them a lot of drive and ambition, though. And it does indicate that often pursuing multiple interests simultaneously is something they can do. So they can have two different businesses. They can have, two different projects they're working on, and they can be really kind of split and diverse when it comes to how they're applying themselves when it comes to interests. Now, what about when we put Jupiter in Gemini? So we did a video on this, so if you're wondering about it, there is a video that is on the channel. You can go check it out. It was probably like a couple weeks ago. We've got Jupiter being looked at in an opposite sign, right? So it's traditionally associated with Sagittarius and Pisces, so it's kind of working through the lens of Gemini. So it does have some hangups, but I do think that Jupiter is a positive planet. We see Jupiter as bringing growth, abundance, travel, some sort of awareness and learning. So we're going to see expansion and growth relating to learning, communication, and intellectual pursuits. So something to kind of think about with Jupiter in this sign is that you may be influenced by a broad array of information and experiences, leading to a much more open-minded and curious worldview. Learning languages, learning more about, traveling and exploring and getting out and kind of going for like longer walks, or having a sense of dual kind of beliefs when it comes to religion, or when it comes to politics, or when it comes to, worldly relations. There is definitely a sense of also, I've seen with some people, this can be really connected to publishing. This can also be connected to being a teacher, teaching younger people. What else? And being somebody who's also very involved in like actual like courses. I've seen a lot of people who teach courses who've got Jupiter in Gemini as well. All right, so then we've got Saturn in Gemini. All right, so if you have Saturn in Gemini, what does that mean? So we're taking Saturn, which is the archetype of, commitment, growth. It's about timing. It's about maturity. This can sometimes be associated with career or elders in our life. And it's kind of like, putting Mercury in a Saturn sign, right? So we're going to feel that there is kind of this, ooh, do I want to say that? Do I know what I'm talking about type of vibe. I feel like Saturn and Gemini, I have seen in some charts that this represents like a stunt in terms of writing, speaking, communicating. It can also talk about challenges that maybe they have with siblings. That can definitely kind of come up here. But I think it's about discipline and structure, and facing challenges relating to communication, learning, and adaptability, and needing to develop patience through thoroughness in these areas. So having your resources and having your facts, knowing your sources, making sure that you know what you're talking about before you say it, reading the contract before you sign it, taking a little bit longer to learn how to drive, and responsibility coming through the roles of communication, teaching, or anything that's intellectual. But obviously Gemini and that connection to Mercury has associations with people like our neighbors, our siblings, our cousins, or aunts, or uncles. These are all mercurial kind of people. So it can represent in certain aspects karma in regards to some of these relationships, or challenges in some of these dynamics as well. And then finally, we've got Uranus in Gemini. We're going to be having this pretty soon. The United States was actually born with this. We're coming into our Uranus return in a couple years. You've got airy, unconventional, chaotic, up and down, back and forth, freedom-loving, rebel-yelling Uranus. and then you throw it into the sign of Gemini, which is about communication and learning and travel. So this is about innovation and change, and innovative ideas, revolutionary thinking to areas related to communication, technology, and learning. A very Uranian mind. It's just kind of all over the place. It can be up and down. It can be conspiracy-esque. It can be very diverse or divided also, or polarizing in its views. And this is also about having a very unconventional approach to intellectual pursuits, and often thinking about things or talking about things that are ahead of its time. So we're going to see this soon. Actually, next year, Uranus is going to go into Gemini. It'll be definitely a part of some stuff I'm going to be talking about in the fall. But it'll be interesting to see this happen. I mean, I haven't experienced this in my lifetime, but I have seen some people who have this placement. And it's interesting to see them be so future thinking and talking about future generations and what needs to happen for the masses. And it can be very inspirational to kind of see some of these people talk. But like I said, we'll experience it here in another year or two. And if you happen to have your north or south node in Gemini, now granted these are not planets, but this is something worthy of mentioning. Obviously, the north node and the south node are points in your chart that do kind of talk about and discuss, where you're growing into, what you're learning in this lifetime, and what is familiar to you and what you're kind of moving away from, or what you're clearing. So with that north node in Gemini, you got to look at the house that it's in. So it's going to tell you the area where you're growing and you're experiencing new things. But you're meant to embody things like communication skills, curiosity and learning, learning to be adaptable and open to change rather than being super rigid to your beliefs, learning to network, and being present, and I think mindedness. I think about focusing on the present moment, the immediate environment, rather than being overly concerned with the distant futures or things that are kind of abstract. Explore out new ideas, be curious, constantly seek knowledge. That's what you want to be doing with that. Now, something that you will learn throughout your life with the North Node in Gemini, I think, is just learning to better communicate, engaging in dialogue, balancing knowledge and action, because remember, the North Node's in Gemini for you and the South Node's in Sag. So you're learning not to lean into the fire element. You're learning to focus more on what you're learning rather than going out and teaching. Exploring new experiences. That may mean that you're exploring new languages, you're exploring new books, you're exploring things about your immediate environment, and you're learning how to kind of connect with your community. Versus the South Node in Gemini, this is the sense of familiarity with, Gemini in past lives, if you believe in reincarnation. So that South Node is going to kind of say, okay, your North Node is in Sag. We're doing more Sagittarian stuff this time around. So that means that the South Node in Gemini is about learning not to become overly reliant on logic. I think that's a big one. And instead of logically reasoning and intellectually understanding, we want to get more into the North Node in Sagittarius. And you want to sometimes do that at the expense of emotional or intuitive insights. This is about no longer skimming the surface of things. So you're going to kind of turn away from superficial knowledge or tabloids or things that are kind of like gossipy. You're learning to deal with restlessness better. You're learning to work through communication issues better. And also there is a sense of integrating knowledge, right? North Node in Sagittarius. You are deepening your understanding and moving beyond superficial learning to gain more of a meaningful understanding of the world at large. This is about developing better emotional intelligence and also having more so stable communication, because that South Node in Gemini can definitely create some inconsistencies like with communication or some breaks in patterns in how you communicate. Obviously, Neptune and Pluto do not apply. So just a heads up for you guys, because, we haven't seen those cycles in some time. We're not going to see it for some time. So you're not going to see that in any natal charts of anybody who's alive right now. And then finally, I just want to kind of wrap up by talking about planets in the houses, because we talked about Gemini, we talked about Mercury, we also talked about the planets in the signs. But I think that, we also have to look at the house. So you may be somebody who has a stellium of planets in the third house and you're like, but I'm a Taurus or I'm a Sagittarius, whatever. You're still going to have this kind of creative, witty, curious Gemini vibe. So you may resonate with some of the archetypal themes of Gemini. And so when we think about the third house in astrology, it has associations with communication, learning, siblings, short distance trips, your immediate environment, what you see every day. But it also has connections to the way that you think. And it also has connections to, like I always call this the junk drawer, a multitude of different things that are connected to your mind. So everything from communicating, writing, speaking, whatever, how you are on your social media, how you organize your phone, how you best learn. This is all the third house. So planets in this house are actually going to play a role. So think of the house as the area of your life. The sign is how it's going to be expressed. And the planets are almost like major key themes or teachers in regards to that department. So, for example, some of you guys might have a planet that you kind of associate with your favorite art or music teacher, right? Venus. Or you have that really strict kind of like, history teacher, Saturn. And so it can talk about whether or not you enjoy the experience of that third house, depending on the planets and their aspects. That's how you put it together. So we talked a little bit about the sun in Gemini, but the sun in the third house is going to exhibit some of the same qualities. Obviously, a huge focus on communication and expressing themselves, sharing ideas and information, but also having a natural love and curiosity for learning. And they'll thrive in environments and really shine where they're able to share their ideas and really stimulate their mind. They may do better when they're, traveling. They may do better when they're, working while they're on the treadmill with a stand-up desk, right? Because this is about working and kind of using their mind at the same time. There may be much more of an emphasis with third house figures. So like I said, the siblings, the neighbors, that kind of stuff can kind of come up through here. And the sun being in the third house means that they may take a leadership role in regards to, people in that environment. They may say, well, I'm the big brother, or, I sit on the homeowners association, board, and I, patrol the neighborhood, that kind of stuff. Then we've got the moon in the third house. So similar to kind of Gemini moon vibes, but obviously it's going to depend on the sign. But the moon in the third house, I've noticed a couple things about these people. So obviously emotions are closely tied to communication, and they need to talk about their feelings to process them. And whether that's getting on the phone, writing it down, going for a walk, and, calling a friend, whatever. They also, I find, are soothed through going for drives. Like they like to go for long drives, or maybe they kind of change homes often. We do see that there can be fluctuating moods and restlessness with the moon in the third house. That is pretty common. And generally there's pretty strong bonds with siblings. Family dynamics play a crucial role in their emotional well-being. And the moon can be, aunts, it can be, female cousins, it could be sisters, it could be female neighbors. And these are generally people that play a pretty big role in regards to their life. Now, Mercury in the third house is a strong placement, obviously depending on the aspects in the sign, but Mercury does well both in the third and the sixth house. So this is really going to put an emphasis on not just communication, but analytical skills. They might think quicker and be more effective at processing information. They might type faster. They might, also be more, aware with hand-eye coordination. And they have a strong aptitude for learning and teaching, and may be involved in education or writing more than most other placements. Highly curious, enjoys exploring new ideas and concepts, and a constant seeker of knowledge. This is something that's pretty common here. And this is also where you see people that are also doing a lot of multitasking. Now, Venus in the third house will have some similarities to Venus in Gemini, but this is about where you're experiencing love and pleasure or beauty, value, money. These people might like nice cars, right? They might like wearing jewelry on their fingers or their wrists. They may have a real fixation with poetry or, anything that's beautiful, that's written, or maybe they're able to draw or create art with their hands. But I think that this is having a real sense of charm and grace in their communication and enjoying harmonious interactions with other people. I definitely feel like these are also people who tend to have better relationships or harmonious relationships with their neighbors. There can be some of that third house Venus where there is an open mind in terms of, relationships, and people can show up in pairs, but you're going to have to look at what's going on with the seventh house as well. But Sometimes we can also see they have really nice handwriting. I've seen some like really amazing like digital artists and people who are into calligraphy who have Venus in the third house as well. Mars in the third house, I feel like, is an interesting one because this is definitely direct and assertive communication, right? Mars is going to be about action, power, drive, and defensiveness. It's piercing. So when Mars is in this house, they may come across as aggressive or argumentative. You may also notice that they have a high mental energy and enthusiasm. They enjoy debates and intellectual challenges. And also, these are people who are active within their environment. So they prefer on active, stimulating environment, and they may have a very busy life with lots of daily errands and trips and running around and doing things. They may also be interested in power walking, biking, anything like that to be able to relieve stress. And then when we look at Jupiter in the third house, this is a little bit of a different energy because you're taking that theme of the broad, open-minded, kind of ninth housely figure and putting it in the third. So what I like about this placement is that I find that they're very broad-minded and optimistic. They enjoy learning about diverse subjects. They like writing about it. They like reposting it. They like sharing it. And also these are natural teachers and mentors, and they may find success in education fields or in publishing or in writing. These are people who also have a love for languages or other languages. This is something you see here. And they also have a tendency to have better relationships with some of their siblings and their local community. Jupiter is seen as like the king or the teacher or the way shower. So it might be somebody who is more likely to want to be involved in, their local politics or running for office or, participating in city council. And then Saturn in the third house, obviously depending on the aspects in the sign, but Saturn being in this house is definitely going to show you where there is a challenge, but what many people don't realize about Saturn is that Saturn delays, he doesn't deny. So a lot of us get to about 30 and we're not a fan of Saturn until we go through our Saturn return and we realize what we're capable of, where we mature, and it actually becomes like a solid kind of point in our chart. So this is about serious communication, disciplined approach to communication and learning, and some people may experience delays and challenges in these areas, learning how to speak up for themselves or learning to read the fine print. But I think that this is also about meaning what you say and saying what you mean and really sticking to it when you've made up your mind. Responsibility when it comes to learning, and whether that's, education or valuing structure and discipline in your intellectual pursuits. Yes, we can see some issues with cars and vehicles and also siblings, like I said, especially in regards to challenges of matters of authority or sometimes boundaries or limits. These are sometimes people we see that are like, I just can't take my sister's phone call right now. I need some space. Or people who actually have issues where they have siblings that are part of like their Saturn lessons in this lifetime. Now, Uranus in the third house obviously is an interesting placement because it does kind of talk about this being a very unconventional thinker, exploring new ideas. This is also about sudden changes and disruptions in communication in their daily life and learning to be more adaptable to the circumstances. I find that these people are quite eccentric when they communicate, very unique, and they have a very distinct type of communication style. And they break away from traditional norms. These can also be people who have frequent kind of disruptions with neighbors. They may travel more often. They might have an unconventional type of way of getting around town. Things like that is what you typically see with Uranus in the third house. And then Neptune being in the third house is interesting because we think of Neptune as being dreamy and whimsical and connected and spiritual, but it can also be dealing with illusions. So one way of looking at this is that they can be very imaginative when it comes to communication. So they can be intuitive. They may have a talent for poetry, music, art, or automatic writing. They're generally pretty drawn to spiritual learning, and whether that's like spiritual or mystical subjects, they may have an interest in wanting to read about astrology, tarot, psychic development, intuitive stuff. Or listening to podcasts, because Neptune can be sound, or music that can kind of be dreamy and kind of spacey. But there can sometimes be with Neptune in the third house, confusion in communication. And, this can be a placement where there can be misunderstandings in communication and a need to clarify intentions better. Because we're taking Neptune, we're putting it in a house of communication. So it can be kind of similar to kind of seeing like a Mercury-Neptune aspect where it's like, is that me or is my mind playing tricks on me? Is that really how I feel? Do I say something? Do I not say something? Am I kind of stretching the truth a little bit? That can sometimes come up with Neptune placements as well. Obviously, you want to see the sign and how it's aspected. I like this for people who write music or poetry. I like this also for musicians as well because there's a really great kind of connection and like instant download and kind of transfer of energy from their hands to, their instrument. And then finally, Pluto in the third house. So if you have Pluto in the third house, regardless of the sign, one of the themes that you're going to see across the board is the transformation of communication in your mind. Okay, so intense and transformative communication style. There can be a very powerful presence in how they communicate through words with other people. They can also be very drawn to deep and profound subjects, uncovering hidden truths and mysteries. So they're going to read the murder mystery books. They're going to read possibly the more kind of like racier, kind of magazines and things that are a little bit more taboo, or maybe they're listening to, like the murder podcast or the true crime podcast, because you're taking Pluto and you're putting it in the third house of the mind and communication and learning. However, there can be power struggles that can happen with this placement, and there can be intense dynamics with siblings or with neighbors. Sometimes they're more prone to kind of seeing what's going on with like crime in their area, Sometimes also your mind can be your biggest enemy if you let that fear kind of get in the way, and if obsessive thinking kind of comes up or whatever, or fixation with communications and devices, very kind of Mercury-Pluto aspects. We see the shadow side of the mind and where it can actually create some issues that can bring us some pain, right? Anyway, just some food for thought. I think that a whole other layer to this would then be kind of looking at the Mercury placements, and you can kind of see some of the same themes if you were to apply Mercury going through the various houses, So if you were to think about the first house, obviously because Mercury is associated with Gemini, if you were to think about the first house has this very direct and kind of communicative style. It's kind of, in your face. So it's self-focused with a strong sense of identity and self-expression. They learn best through self-discovery, and they learn best also through personal experiences. And they have a tendency to kind of communicate things very directly and independently and with a sense of confidence. Versus Mercury being in the second house, you're going to see a much more kind of practical, focused on material matters. They might like talking about money. They like to talk about food. They're focusing on security. They may find that they value stability and a practical approach to learning. They learn best through hands-on experiences and tangible rewards. So these are people who are going to learn, I think, with a reward system. So if you got little kids with Mercury in the second house, or if you got a pet or an animal, if you know their chart, the treat system is going to work with these people. And they tend to communicate on more in regards to financial matters and personal values. So they're going to tell you what they find valuable. I also find Mercury in the second house. These are people who make money through education or communication. They may make money also through collections, and they may collect books and other things kind of connected to literature. We talked about Mercury in the third house, but one thing I would just say to add on to that would be that they're going to learn best through communication and interactions and exploring immediate surroundings and having other people to go back and forth with. So they need to be able to, and this is Mercury in the third, express ideas clearly and enjoy engaging lively conversations with other people. So they need to be able to have people to kind of converse with, I think, to learn. Versus Mercury in the fourth house, okay, so the communication style is going to be more nurturing and intuitive or family oriented. They may be more reflective and empathic with a strong sense to family and home. Maybe they learn best by nurturing and having like a supportive environment, and where they have values that are connected to their emotions in learning. And they're going to communicate with sensitivity and maybe drawn to topics related to home and family. Now, if we put Mercury in the 5th house, a little bit of a different vibe because it's got this loud and proud vibe. It's creative, it's expressive, it's dramatic, but how they think is more playful and imaginative, right? Think of the 5th house and the connection to Leo. They're going to want to play the role. They are going to have a love for creative expression. So the way that they're going to learn best is through creative artistic pursuits, where they're valuing their self-expression and their individuality. And they're going to express themselves and communicate with passion and enjoy being the center of attention. I think, there is this sense of wanting to share their thoughts and kind of being on stage. So these can be great for actors. These could be great for performers. It can be great for also, public speakers, people who want to give like TED Talks and stuff where it's just them kind of running around on stage. Very Mercury in the 5th house. And then we have Mercury in the 6th house. So Mercury in the 6th house is definitely a strong placement because of the connections and association with Virgo, which we'll get to when we get to Virgo season. But I see this as their communication style being very analytical, very detail-oriented, service-oriented. They're very methodical when it comes to their process. They're very precise. And there's a focus on practical matters and daily routines here. And I think that they learn best through structured and organized methods, having a routine, feeling like they're being productive, checking off a to-do list. And they're going to best express themselves when they're communicating with precision and they're in a position where they can help other people. So it's like, okay, what do you need? How can I help you? And being able to go back and forth and being able to give solutions or fixes. This is why Virgo has associations with the 6th house and healing. Busy work too. Now let's say Mercury's in the 7th house. With Mercury in the 7th house, there's definitely going to be much more of like a diplomatic, harmonious, partnership-oriented kind of style with communication. They tend, with their thinking, to be more fair-minded and cooperative, and I feel like they really value relationships and partnerships and getting feedback from other people. They learn best through interaction and collaboration with others. Obviously, this is another air sign. And they value balance and harmony in learning. So kind of going back and forth with another person, being able to give feedback. Generally, they're going to express themselves best when they're able to communicate with tact and diplomacy, and they enjoy discussing ideas with other people, but I found what they really like is giving and receiving feedback. What about Mercury in the 8th house? Okay, so if you have Mercury in the 8th house, communication style is intense. It can feel probing. It can be transformative. It can be very psychic. They can also be excellent when it comes to research. These are people who think very deep and they're very insightful with a focus on uncovering hidden truth. This is something that I find with Mercury 8th house placements. They learn best through intense study and research. And they value, depth and complexity in learning. Things that are hidden, more taboo, secret, or sensitive information or data. And they're going to express themselves best when they're able to communicate with power and intensity, often diving into taboo or controversial topics. Now, what if you have Mercury in your 9th house? Okay, so Mercury in the 9th house. This is going to be a communication style that's going to be more philosophical. It's going to be more expansive. You're going to be seen as like a visionary. So when they think, it's going to be more broad-minded and adventurous. And there is a love for exploring new ideas and new concepts. So when they're learning, they're going to learn best through travel, high education, and exposure to different cultures and philosophies, having mentors, having multiple mentors or teachers or authors that they follow, and traveling in foreign places, being in places that are kind of foreign to them. And they're going to express themselves best when they're able to communicate with enthusiasm and optimism, sharing their knowledge and ideas with other people because of that kind of Jupiterian influence. Now, let's say you have Mercury in the 10th house, right? So Mercury in the 10th house is going to be, in terms of your communication style, it's going to be much more professional. There's going to be a sense of authority kind of to the tone. Very ambitious when it comes to communications with people out in the world. And that's because the thinking style is more goal-oriented and practical. And there can be much more of a focus on career, reputation, and public image, what people are talking about when it comes to you. Once again, can be an indication that you're somehow kind of connected to media, writing, or teaching. But they learn best through practical experience and real-world applications. They value success and achievement, and they communicate with authority and may be drawn to leadership roles or public speaking. I love Mercury in the 10th house for that. I also love this for public relations. I think it's also wonderful for people who have this to go and get real on-the-job skills. So maybe you are working as an intern, maybe you are volunteering, maybe you are kind of shadowing someone, or you're working as an apprentice, because Mercury is the student. So you actually have to go and follow people who are successful. You have to go and be around them and learn from them and kind of work your way up. So you're learning how to kind of communicate and share your ideas out in the world so you can get that recognition and growth within your career. Now, Mercury in the 11th house, this is a fun placement because their communication style is very integrative, innovative, progressive, and social, because this is also another air house. But when they think, they're original, quirky, different, fast forward thinking. There's a focus sometimes on social change, innovation, progress, the future. So these can be people who are talking about things way down the line. They learn best through group activities and collaborative projects, and they value friendship and community. So where they learn best is being like, okay, you're going to go and do a group project, right? Even though I know we all hated those when we were in school, but they do very well because they may be able to kind of like bring all of the parts and everybody together and kind of communicate and have everybody actually do their work. So it is a group project rather than being left holding the bag doing it by yourself. They learn best through group activities, like I said, and that's because when they communicate, how they best express themselves, when they communicate and they focus on group ideas or humanitarian ideas or anything with activism or social causes, that's when they're able to do their best work. So they really can kind of go and kind of round up the masses and talk about things that are going to be really important on a collective level. And then finally, we have Mercury in the 12th house. So when Mercury is in the 12th house, obviously this is in the house of what's kind of hidden, subconscious. It can also be a very intuitive placement. But also it can be spiritual, it can be compassionate, it can be very empathic. And it can be sometimes caution with wanting to say things that you already know. You might be able to read between the lines a little bit better, that in the 8th house placement. And in terms of thinking, right, you're very imaginative. There can be a sense of empathy and deep understanding and having really strong subconscious patterns. But the key here is that the way that you best learn is through introspection and having some kind of spiritual practice and really valuing intuition and inner guidance. Taking time to step aside and let the mind silent a little bit, like go silent, so you can get the answers that you're seeking. And that can come through a download, that can come through a dream, and allowing that to kind of guide you as you make decisions, in the waking times. Now, the way that you're best going to express yourself is through communicating with sensitivity and also integrating something about mystical or spiritual topics. I've seen a lot of people with Mercury in the 12th house where they do some kind of science fiction writing, or maybe they do some fantasy writing, or, it's creating the storyline, from the ethers that's in your mind. And it can also be about being somebody who's super sensitive and perceptive. Mercury in the 4th, 8th, and 12th house generally have those aspects depending on what signs you have in those houses. Anyway, obviously lots of words for a Gemini video. Wanted to really go through that and talk to you guys about, obviously, the different planets in Gemini, Mercury through the signs, a little bit more on the archetype of Gemini and how we can learn to kind of see that out in the world. I hope you guys like this video and it gives you more insight. Enjoy that Kazemi that's going to be coming up here pretty soon. Lots of sparkles that are coming from Mercury over the next couple of days. So watch for those intuitive messages and things that are going to be popping in. Are you a Gemini? Do you have planets in Gemini, or do you have a number of planets in your third house or a strong mercurial signature? Leave me your comments below. It's always helpful to hear from these signs and get feedback from you guys. And I hope you guys are doing well with that Saturn transit. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Any interaction with the channel, it helps the channel grow. I will be here tomorrow. We are going to be doing readings on the channel. You can catch me here at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing tarot readings. So if you guys want your questions answered, I'm happy to help. For everything else, click the links below. Go to beyondtheveiltarot.com, where you guys can check out my courses, my sessions with me, and also my astro calendars. Those are on sale right now. Until next time, I'll catch all of you guys back here really soon, and you take care.